Mr. President, this Council has had hundreds of meetings to discuss the Palestinian question since it was first seized of the matter in 1947. For Guyana, at its core, the Palestinian question is a question of justice. Thus far, justice has been delayed, and therefore justice has been denied to the people of Palestine for more than 7 decades. This injustice was born in violence and has continued to be manifested in further cycles of violence, with perhaps the worst manifestation beginning on 7th of October 2023, and continuing as we meet here today. It has also been manifested in repression of a kind that has put a stranglehold on the Palestinian nation and seriously imperiled its right to exist. The international community and the Council have consistently rejected these designs on the Palestinian people, reiterating their inalienable rights, including their right to live in freedom and dignity in a state of their own. Notwithstanding, the injustice continues, necessitating greater efforts by this Council and other United Nations bodies to bring about compliance with their decisions on the Palestinian question. This is the fundamental difficulty in addressing the injustice against the Palestinian people: non-compliance with legally and morally binding decisions, and a lack of accountability for this non-compliance. The Council needs a new approach that would yield sustainable results. Mr. President, Excellencies, the latest cycle of violence against the Palestinian people in the Gaza Strip has created a crisis of catastrophic proportions. It may take generations for the consequences to be addressed. Homes, schools, hospitals, roads, and other critical infrastructure have been destroyed, concomitantly depriving more than 2 million Palestinians of their right to be free from arbitrary interference of their homes, to education, to health care, and to a dignified existence. This war is also leaving a devastating human toll, with nearly 34,000 Palestinians killed and close to 80,000 injured since October 7th. The occupying power, Israel, has described this war as a war to destroy the capabilities of Hamas. In reality, however, it is a war that is destroying women and children at a disproportionate rate. They represent almost 70% of those killed. It is also a war that has created fatal levels of insecurity for civilians and humanitarian personnel, including UN personnel, with more humanitarian workers killed over the last 6 months than in any single conflict in a single year. Mr. President, dear colleagues, having considered all of the deprivations to which the population in the Gaza Strip has been subject to since October 7th, one can justifiably conclude that a deliberate strategy of collective punishment of the worst kind is being inflicted on the Palestinian people. This strategy involves indiscriminately wounding civilians while simultaneously shrinking their access to health care. It also involves a systematic decrease in the safe places to which they have access, cramming them into smaller and smaller spaces while simultaneously threatening to bomb those same spaces. This strategy has also incorporated starvation as a method of warfare, evidenced by, inter alia, attacks on those attempting to meet the needs of starving Palestinians. Palestinians themselves have been fatally attacked while seeking sustenance. The results of this strategy have been malnutrition, famine, disease, and death. It must stop. The occupying power has obligations under international law, including international humanitarian law, with which it must strictly comply. In this context, Israel is obligated to implement the orders issued by the International Court of Justice on 26th of January and 28th of March, and Guyana calls for full compliance. Guyana reiterates its call for an immediate and sustained ceasefire in Gaza, as demanded in Resolution 2728. Without a ceasefire, humanitarian efforts in Gaza will not have the desired impact of alleviating the suffering. We stress the importance of additional routes into Gaza to scale up humanitarian relief and call on Israel to immediately implement its decision in this regard without impediments. Guyana also underscores the importance of the work of agencies providing critical support to the Palestinian people. In this regard, we stress the importance of UNRWA as an indispensable lifeline for Palestinians. We further stress the need to ensure adequate funding for UNRWA. Mr. President, Excellencies, as we discuss the current catastrophic situation in Gaza, as a result of the violence unleashed by Israel since the 7th of October, attacks by Hamas, both of which we condemn, we must not forget that this is a symptom of the failure to address the core issue, that of a two-state solution where the peoples of Palestine and Israel live side by side. Indeed, Mr. President, Excellencies, and colleagues, as this Council prepares to consider the state of Palestine's membership of the United Nations, Guyana sees a perverse paradox. We have, on the one hand, a situation where one of the two states, the state of Palestine, who, notwithstanding the horrors they continue to face under decades of occupation, continues to believe in this United Nations and is therefore here before us once again to seek membership. On the other hand, we have the other state, Israel, a full member of the United Nations since 1949, who is relentless in denigrating and denouncing the United Nations, including today, being the most ardent opposer to the state of Palestine's application for membership. Guyana will not let such perverse paradox derail our support for Palestine as a UN member. We must end this injustice and deliver on the decades-old commitment made by the international community, by this Council and the General Assembly, for the creation of a free and independent state of Palestine. The admission of the state of Palestine as a member of the UN is a critical and necessary step in this direction, and we hope that when the question is put to us later, all hands will be raised to vote in favor of the legitimate and just request of the Palestinian people. The resolution of the Palestinian question requires political will and decisions based in principles of truth, justice, and fairness. Guyana is prepared to work with this Council and all members of the United Nations to make those decisions to secure the freedom and dignity of the Palestinian people. I end, Mr. President, by expressing Guyana's full and unwavering solidarity with the Palestinian people. I thank you.
We express our deepest gratitude to His Excellency Mr. Antonio Guterres, the Secretary General of the United Nations, for the important insights he shared with the Council. We welcome the presence in this meeting of the Special Representative of the President of the State of Palestine, as well as of the other distinguished ministers and high dignitaries. Mr. President, the recent events in the Middle East have heightened our concerns over prospects of a calamitous catastrophe in the region if the Council is not united in addressing this urgent matter. We, as members of the United Nations, have a shared responsibility to prevent escalation and to strive for a just and fair solution to the problem. Urgent actions are crucial. They include securing an immediate humanitarian ceasefire in Gaza, releasing all hostages, and ensuring unimpeded humanitarian aid delivery. We must note that a negative factor that exacerbates tensions is the presence of Israeli settlements in the occupied Palestinian territories, a matter that is contrary to international law. More importantly, it undermines the prospects for a viable and independent Palestinian state. Mr. President, since the adoption of Resolution 2728 by this Council, demanding an immediate ceasefire The conflict continues unabated in the Gaza Strip. The number of victims is growing steadily. Reports indicate that in the past 6 months, more than 33,000 Palestinians were killed and thousands injured, the majority of whom are children and women. In addition, a senseless and unwarranted destruction of civilian infrastructures is taking place. All this in a blatant violation of international humanitarian law and international human rights law. At this critical juncture, the pursuit of peace and stability in the region is of paramount importance. This Council has the primary responsibility to pursue that aim. Mr. President, the Gaza Strip, home to approximately 2 million Palestinians, grapples with an unprecedented humanitarian crisis. The situation is precarious and, if aggravated, could have devastating consequences for the civilians who already bear the brunt of the conflict in the occupied Palestinian territories, in Syria, and Lebanon, and the entire region. Mozambique defends actions aimed at a comprehensive response from all parties involved to mitigate the impact of hostilities in compliance with the Security Council Resolution 2712, 2720, and 2728. In this context, we call on Israel to comply with these and other Security Council resolutions and with the International Court of Justice decisions on the matter. The ICJ decisions impel Israel to take all possible measures to minimize the deaths of civilians and humanitarian workers and increase vital humanitarian assistance. To this end, the opening of more aid entry corridors for the population of Gaza is a matter of highest priority. In this connection, we wish to express once again our strong support for the work by UNRWA and its entire staff. The right to life and dignity of the people in Gaza and Palestine depends to a large extent on their effort and dedication. We express our deep sorrow for and the condemnation of the tragic loss of the humanitarian workers from the World Central Kitchen. They were brave in providing essential food aid to civilians in Gaza. Their selflessness and dedication to helping others are highly commendable. Mr. President, Mozambique stands firm in our recognition of the unalienable right of the Palestinian people to self-determination, political independence, and sovereignty. This right is deeply anchored in the Charter of the United Nations, in principles and norms of international law, and in the rights of peoples and countries to govern themselves. They do not depend on a plebiscite, referendum, or judgment of other alien peoples and governments. Mozambique firmly defends the vision of a two-state solution, of two independent and sovereign states, Israel and Palestine, both as members of the United Nations, coexisting as good neighbors, living side by side in peace and security as prescribed by the Charter of the United Nations. I thank you, Mr. President.